Hello, I'm Jonathan, also known as Giblert and many other lame aliases. Recently, I was playing a game I really liked, and I thought to myself, where would this game rank compared to every other game I've ever played? Would this game make my personal top 10? 20? 50? 100? I'd never thought too deeply about it myself, but I was curious. Of course, the first step would be to list out every game I've played, narrow it down to a top 100, then shake it up and sort it out. And that's exactly what I've done here. I figure it'll be a fun way to look back at old memories and have an excuse to drag out some old toys to play with again. And maybe I can convince a few people to try out some of my favorite games. But first, some quick things to keep in mind. This is strictly my opinion and tastes on the games I've played in my first 25 years of life, as in only the games I've played before my 25th birthday. I make zero attempt to be objective, and I won't even try to take off my nostalgia goggles for purposes of talking about these games. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed taking a walk down memory lane with me as I review my gaming history, starting with number 100. Starting off the list, Blizzard's online Warcraft-themed CCG, Hearthstone. I've never been a huge card game guy. Sure, I had boxes upon boxes full of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon cards as a kid, but like many kids, I had no clue how to actually play, and anytime I would try to play with friends, the rules would devolve quickly into whatever bullshit we made up. Nonetheless, when I heard someone mention Hearthstone a bit before it came out, I knew it would scratch an itch I had for a pick-up-and-play, semi-competitive, semi-casual game to play a couple rounds of here and there. The simple, well-designed presentation and relatively intuitive mechanics made it pretty easy to get into. Early on, most of my fun came from cluelessly slapping together terrible decks yet somehow scraping together a few wins. Usually I used some awful mind control priest deck or some other gimmicky BS. As I accrued more cards, I became a dirty net decker. Less fulfilling creatively, but way more fun to actually be competitive and not be a cripple. I remember Miracle Rogue was one of the first meta net decks I copied, which if you don't remember that one, it was a combo deck using Gadgets and Auctioneer to quickly cycle the deck, and using Leroy Jenkins plus Shadow Step to do massive one-turn damage as a finisher. It was a really fun deck, and also fun to counter BMing players with a wombo combo for 26 face damage when they thought they had the game won. Though after that got nerfed into the Shadow Realm, I would still check in and net deck something meta for constructed every few seasons, usually some Mongo Hunter Rush deck or Zulok since those are cheap, or some cheesy combo deck like Patron Warrior. But I was mostly into the draft mode, Arena. The variety of Arena and the thrill of drafting an OP deck when the draft offers you 4 fireballs or some broken combo made it way more fun than constructed for me, plus the fact of not having to worry about crafting meta decks since that shit's expensive. And once the game was out on mobile, having a quick competitive game anywhere was amazing for a college student waiting between classes. I even ended up meeting some new friends in college, coincidentally because of Hearthstone. I recall I was waiting for class and the professor mentioned he used to play Magic a bunch, which eventually led to me talking to a classmate about Hearthstone, which we would typically end up playing for a while between classes since we had a similar schedule and a lot of time to kill. Time I probably should have killed by studying or some shit, but I also probably shouldn't have played it in the middle of so many lectures. Me and a few friends even ended up entering a couple of college tournaments, which was a great experience since I hadn't played any sort of real competition since I was about 13 or 14 in a couple of ESEA games. We did decently enough, clutching it enough to make playoffs, though never making it past the first round. I'm pretty sure I slept through one of the playoff matches too. I also got a really comfortable t-shirt out of it from Tespa. Good memories all around. It's been several years since I opened up the game aside from a few rounds I played to gather footage and refresh my memory. I'm sure any decks I have are woefully out of date by now, judging by how the few games of Wild Mode I played went. I also fell behind the arena meta, so my gold funds for entry fees eventually dried up too. So those barriers to entry, I don't have a ton of interest in getting into it again. Still, in spite of often crying about excessive RNG, meta changes, balancing, outrageous dust prices, and the obnoxious daily quest system, I overall look back at my time with the game very fondly. Would I recommend the game to others? Not necessarily. And all the bullshit surrounding card game monetization is mainly why I don't love it more, but I can't say I had fun with the game. Enough to give it a spot in my top 100. Next up, the puzzle visual novel, Will, A Wonderful World. To start things off, I haven't fully replayed this game through recently. However, I do recall working my way through the story surprisingly quickly, considering it's a rather meaty visual novel, about 12 hours long. I don't remember how I found this game either. I think I by chance stumbled upon it on the Steam store? Not sure. I don't want to give away too much about the story since it's most of the point of a visual novel. To summarize though, you You work as a sort of god, answering people's wishes using a magicish sort of pen to rearrange a series of sentences and rewrite reality. By changing the order of the sentences, you change how the events unfold. For example, if you had the sentences, "bullets came flying in my direction," and "I got in my car," with the initial order, the story may play out as I turned around, bullets came flying in my direction. I felt a sharp pain and managed to limp into my car, where I bled out," which isn't a great result. However, if you rearrange the sentences with "I got in my car" first, the story may play out as "I got in my car, I heard gunshots as bullets came flying in my direction, shattering my window while a few others ricocheted off my car door. I hit the gas and escaped." A much better conclusion. It's a cool little puzzle mechanic that mixes some light gameplay into all the text-heavy reading. Most of the solutions feel really clever, and even the times you rearrange the sentences into fail states can be pretty funny, or sometimes sad. The story itself follows the overarching plot between the sort of god characters as well as a bunch of humans, and a cat, whose stories often intertwine in ways that are often neat, sometimes tragic. Writing-wise, I've seen some reviews criticize the translation. It's a Chinese game, although I don't remember anything too noticeably messed up when I played. Granted, it has been over 3 years since I played through it, which, now that I'm looking at it, feels insane. I didn't realize it had been that long. As for the actual content of the writing, there's a bit of tonal whiplash where some parts feel sort of oddly out of place or overly anime-ish, while others feel pretty grounded and bleak. Although, I think that contrast is partially intentional. The real world is full of contrasting tones and moods. On one side of the world, some couple is celebrating their wedding while a nervous groomsman locks his knees too long and passes out and everyone has a laugh. On the other side of the world, some cartel hitman is flaying someone alive while Funky Town plays in the background. The real world is pretty absurd like that, so in a way the contrasting tones and general weirdness kind of makes it a little bit more realistic in a way, I guess. Also, the ending, frankly, wasn't satisfying in both the overarching god plot as well as most of the individual Earthling characters. Some of them feel oddly incomplete, though it's possible I missed some alternate ending or something in my playthrough. Again, maybe some of the lack of resolution is intentional realism. Real life often isn't conclusive or tied together neatly, I guess. All that aside, there's plenty of variety in the character stories. You'll probably like some more than others. I recall liking Lee, Carlos, and the cop, though everyone is interesting enough that I never thought, "Oh shit, I guess I have to do this one now." There's enough variety that you should be able to find some characters to relate to. As the cherry on top, the presentation is well done. Everything from the little sound effects to little visual touches in the backgrounds that correspond to each character. The music as a whole is relaxing and does a good job of setting the mood. It also helps set the stage for each of the different locales. For example, the background music in the scenes in Mexico sort of gets you in the mood and says, "Hey, we're moving to a new location now," which is important as the cast is really worldwide, everywhere from China to Korea to Mexico and beyond. Overall, I don't read too many visual novels or play many puzzle games, but Will makes it work, and has some enjoyable stories to keep you occupied. It has its flaws, and the plot is a little too anime at times. Though overall, a pretty wonderful little game that I'd recommend at least giving a try to most people who like visual novels. For number 98, Running with Rifles. Running with Rifles is a budget, top-down military shooter with a mix of arcade and tactical elements, created by a small indie developer, Osumia Games. I happened upon an early demo version of this game around 2011 or 2012 on the Facepunch forums. It only had one level and maybe 2 or 3 guns, which all basically did the same shit. Still, the core gameplay and all the aspects of the game I like were already there. Big battles, chill pick up and play gameplay, large varied map. The version I've played the most have only had maybe 2 or 3 maps. Had many fewer features, no campaign mode, and only a few vehicles. None of the more fancy bells and whistles I've run into upon reinstalling recently. You're a regular soldier pretty much. No special powers aside from your squad commands, often die in 1 or 2 shots. The main goal is to attack several key capture points until you capture the whole map. You don't impact the fight much directly, considering how many enemies there are. However, with some sneaky tactical moves or a lot of banging your head against the wall, you can eventually tip the scales in your favor. I didn't realize this up until recently, but someone else in a Steam user review mentioned that the game has a similar appeal as playing the huge bot matches in Star Wars Battlefront 2. More on that eventually. Of course, the stakes are pretty low. If you die, you're one of hundreds of units, so in spite of thousands of bullets, bombs, and bodies flying around, it's actually a pretty good game to relax with while listening to music, podcasts, or boring lectures. which is what most of my playtime consists of. What the game does best is the sense of scale. Some of the maps are huge, especially the original map, and the large unit count makes the battlefield really feel alive. The zoomed out, distant, top-down view also helps emphasize how you're a small part of something big, which in turn makes the moments where you go hero mode and break through the stalemate feel even better. The effects and graphics also do a good job of making the battle feel chaotic without getting too cluttered. There are a lot of organic little engagements that emerge from the massive battles. Slowly chipping away at an enemy entrenchment when all of a sudden an enemy vehicle flanks you and forces you to scatter or nukes your whole squad add excitement to what can at times be a slow, steady affair. It's also supremely satisfying to finally see the map all under your control after what could easily be a battle that lasts hours or thousands of kills. Realistically, I'm not going to replay every game on this list. Some I physically don't have the hardware to do so, others I'd rather let live in my memories rather than spoil the nostalgia with reality. However, as such a small download, I did end up replaying this one quite a bit while making this video. At first I thought all the new updates and changes would clutter what used to be a clean, simple experience. However, the core simplicity is still there and most of the changes seem to only add variety. You can still easily stick to the basics of running around with a rifle, as the name implies, and doing everything as a regular old infantryman. But yeah, a lot has changed. Apparently there's multiplayer, a campaign, zombies, shitload of new items, three-way battles, and a few reworks of old mechanics, which are generally good changes. As a crotchety 25-year-old who hates seeing old games changed, I actually found I liked most of the new updates. The only thing I'd like to see in a sequel or update or whatever is more destructible environments. I think that'd really add a lot of strategic depth and chaos to the mix by letting you change the terrain or take down cover to push things in your favor. As a game made by a small group, it's a little janky and low budget. However, for only $15, I'd highly recommend giving it a try, and it's definitely earned its place in my top 100. And now, number 97. Rocksmith 2014. Rocksmith 2014 is basically a learning tool. It's Guitar Hero, except you can use any real guitar or bass guitar. This one's gonna be a bit short since there isn't a whole lot to say. It's Guitar Hero with real instruments and it works well, and it's a fun way to get a little extra practice in. I'm a very casual bass and guitar player. I practice erratically, have minimal training, very low technical skill, and I'm not dedicated to the craft at all. So, having an easy way to set up and play along with minimal thought required is a great way to get me to actually pick up an instrument from time to time. The little gamey elements of going for a better score is also a nice extra motivator to keep practicing. Inherently, playing an instrument is just fun, so making Guitar Hero with real instruments and adding some extra tools for learning is a simple, good idea. Rocksmith 2014 also improved a ton on the original game, which was very janky and missing a lot of basic features. 2014 on the other hand looks better, gives more flexibility for adjusting difficulty, and has a much nicer UI. Lots of little upgrades adding up to one huge upgrade. Of course you can't talk about a music game without talking about the music. There are some favorites of mine: Backcountry, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Peace of Mind, Pour Some Sugar on Me, Everlong, Are You Mine, The Trooper, You Really Got Me, Knights of Sidonia, and so on and so forth. Either way, if you need more songs, importing the old Rocksmith 1 songs helps add some variety with some other great hits, like Sunshine of Your Love, Are You Gonna Go My Way, Go With The Flow, High and Dry, Rebel Rebel, Higher Ground, Satisfaction, and plenty more. Also, there's a ton of DLC, both official and unofficial, so you can play along with nearly any relatively popular song with a guitar or bass in it. So really, even if the game shipped with 0 songs, it wouldn't really matter since the community's always there to take care of the rest. As a learning tool, I've never really tried to use it like that. I'm sure you can, and there's some in-game lessons and stuff like that, but I've just felt that when I do get the urge to actually try to improve or learn a specific song, it's easier to learn with regular tabs or watch YouTube videos from teachers or drill things in the old-fashioned way. What Rocksmith is good for is, like I said, a quick fun way to get to work quickly. It's way easier to play along with a song you may have never even heard before, when it's presented all Guitar Hero style. All in all, there's nothing too complicated about Rocksmith 2014. It just does what it intends to do well, and it feels good to play. The last one for today, Fire Emblem, 3 Houses, the newest entry of the long-running strategy RPG franchise. After the ugly weeaboo waifu betification of the 3DS titles, the initial reveal for 3 Houses didn't give me a ton of hope for the game. And yeah, I mean, it is another weeb waifu shitbait game, no doubt about that. But at least, the characters weren't all horrifically obnoxious and the gameplay is classic Fire Emblem. Sure, there are a ton of issues with the game. The monastery parts are pretty repetitive, made slightly better with patches. The story is kind of a mess, some routes more than others. The rewind mechanic makes the game way too forgiving without the DLC difficulty settings. Also, some parts of the game feel straight up unfinished, such as the rather short Black Eagles route. The game also doesn't do much to punish slow play, something I felt has been a downside of the balancing of the series for a while. And yet, even with all those flaws, the game does enough things right to be pretty damn good. First of all, like I said before, it's classic Fire Emblem gameplay and a portable package, which is almost always going to be a good game to have in your backpack. I ended up buying my Switch in 3 houses when it came out, while I was out of town for a month for job training in Denver, right before moving to a new city. After training, I went back to my home in Austin to pack, then Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks, then an Airbnb, then a friend's place, then another coworker's place before finally ending up in my new apartment a month after arrival. Of course, my belongings still weren't there yet either, so it was basically me, an empty floor, 1 blanket, a backpack, and a Switch to keep me company. With all this moving around and going through the changes of finishing up school and starting a new job, having a familiar type of game to play each night before bed helped keep everything sort of centered and feel a little less chaotic. Second of all, it's got a ton of content. I've only finished 1 route, Black Eagles, which took a while, half completed Dimitri's, half completed the DLC side story, and still haven't even touched the other 2 routes. Granted, the last 2 are pretty similar. If I'm ever on the move again and need something to keep me busy, I'm glad to have plenty of content for the long haul. Now, to be a bit critical again, it probably would have been better if they hadn't stretched the game way too thin, and had 1 or 2 really good routes instead of a bunch of mediocre ones, but that's a topic for another time. Third, even though I whine about the waifu bait bullshit, I do still like some of the characters and all their ultra anime weirdness. Yeah, most of them are kind of anime tropey or fit the classic Fire Emblem archetypes, but they have enough little variations on the classic tropes to make them likable. For example, I like that they took the loyal simp knight archetype from the previous games, such as Seth and Jeffrey, and mixed it up by making him a pale, edgy, morally dubious school shooter looking dark mage creep. Or Felix, who fits into the edgy sword boy archetype, but his backstory and history with the rest of his class make him more interesting than the random edgy wander myrmidons from the other games, like Navarro, Carol, Marissa. Although I did like Marissa despite her being an awful unit. The writing for each character is a mixed bag. However, I love that every character has conversations with every other character in their class, plus some extras, so everyone has at least a few interesting moments. It's also a nice touch that the non-main characters show up in cutscenes, even if they don't say much. It makes them feel like a real part of the team. Another thing about the characters that stood out to me was that the English dub voice acting was consistently well done. Out of all the main playable characters, only a few stood out as bad, and even those were at least average enough to not be a big deal. Geralt, the main lords, and the retainers were all especially great. All in all, the cast of 3 Houses was definitely likable enough that I enjoyed spending time with them and seeing them grow up after the time skip, which made killing them in the latter half of the game quite sad, so working as the developers intended. Fourth, some minor gameplay tweaks in terms of the unit design are welcome changes, namely, archers having a unique purpose and not being useless shits. Giving each character a unique spell list, similar to Shadows of Valentia, is also a pleasant change which helps make each playable unit feel a little extra unique. I also really like the battalions, not only gameplay-wise, but in terms of adding some spectacle to the battles. I always felt it was kind of weird that your army in previous games seemed to only show 10 or 20 people outside of cutscenes, so having a bunch of other grunts visualized helps add some sense of scale to the battles. Final extra bit, the soundtrack is excellent. The final battle music is especially amazing, as well as the ending song, Edge of Dawn. I also still hum the monastery music to myself quite often. 3 Houses has a ton of rough edges, and it isn't my favorite Fire Emblem game. There are many more on my list further up. Nonetheless, it mostly lived up to the hype and definitely justified my Switch purchase. Good enough to make the 96th spot on my list. So, there we have it. The first 5 of my 100 favorite video games of my first 25 years. If you enjoyed watching me ramble on, look for my next video where I continued my stroll down memory lane, and if you didn't, let me know why. Either way, thanks for watching and hope to see you next time.